There are 3 books being passed around right now, quietly, urgently, like a secret you're not supposed to keep to yourself. And every single person who finishes one of them ends up doing the exact same thing. They close the book, they sit there for a second, completely still, and then they pick up their phone and they message someone, anyone, and they say some version of the same sentence. You need to read this. That's not an accident. That's not marketing. That's what happens when a story is built correctly, when every piece of it exists to make you feel something you weren't ready to feel. Today, I'm going to tell you the stories behind 3 books that are doing exactly that right now. One is about a girl who was never supposed to survive her own life and falls in love with the one person who could end it. One is about a woman who has already lost everything and a man who shows up carrying the last words of the person she loved most. And one is about a woman who moves into a house full of secrets and discovers that the thing stalking her in the dark might be the only person who has ever truly seen her. By the end of this video, you're going to know exactly why these 3 stories have millions of people obsessed. So get comfortable, because we're starting with the one that changed everything. Picture a girl named Violet. She was raised for a quiet life, a scholar's life, surrounded by books and ink and the safety of a library. That was the plan her whole existence was built around, because Violet's body is fragile in a world that has no patience for fragile things. Her bones break easier than most. Her joints ache before she's even walked a mile. And in the world she lives in, weakness like that usually gets you killed before you turn 20. Here's the problem. Violet's mother is a general, cold, commanding, and utterly unwilling to let her daughter hide in a library while everyone else's children go to war. So instead of the quiet path Violet spent her whole life preparing for, her mother forces her into something else entirely. The writer's quadrant. The place where the strongest, fastest, most brutal young soldiers in the kingdom train to bond with dragons. The place where, statistically, most of them die before they ever earn their wings. Violet walks through those gates knowing 2 things. First, that almost everyone around her is stronger, faster, and more likely to survive than she is. And second, that some of those very same people would be relieved to see her fail. Because in this world, failure is often engineered. Rivals push the weak off ledges. Accidents happen that aren't really accidents. Violet isn't just fighting to earn a dragon. She's fighting to make it through breakfast. And this is where the story does something clever. Because standing directly in Violet's path is a young man named Adeline. Dangerous, controlled, and carrying a reason to want her dead that goes back generations. Tied to a rebellion her own family was responsible for crushing. He is, by every measure, the single most threatening person in her orbit. His father was executed on the orders of Violet's own mother, and everyone around Violet assumes it's only a matter of time before Xaden finishes what that history started. So, of course, he becomes the one person she can't stop thinking about. What makes this pairing so magnetic isn't just the tension of enemies who probably shouldn't trust each other. It's that Xaden is the only person in the entire school who doesn't treat Violet like she's broken. Everyone else sees her fragility first. He sees the mind underneath it, sharp and strategic in ways brute strength can't touch. And slowly, chapter by chapter, that recognition becomes something neither of them can walk away from. Even though loving each other might be the single most dangerous decision either of them could make, there's a rhythm to how this relationship develops that's worth pausing on, because it's part of why readers get so attached. It isn't instant. Violet spends a good portion of the story genuinely unsure whether Xaden is protecting her or simply keeping her alive long enough to use her for something else. Every kindness he shows her arrives wrapped in suspicion. Every moment of vulnerability gets immediately second-guessed, and that slow unraveling of trust, one small act at a time, is exactly what makes the eventual payoff hit as hard as it does. You're not just watching 2 people fall for each other. You're watching Violet slowly convince herself it's safe to stop bracing for betrayal in a world that has taught her over and over that safety is an illusion. Meanwhile, the school itself is trying to kill her in ways that have nothing to do with romance at all. There are wing leaders who see her as a liability. There are classmates who genuinely believe the weak shouldn't be allowed to survive training because a rider who can't hold her own in the field gets everyone around her killed too. Violet has to outmaneuver all of it, politically, physically, constantly, while also trying to figure out whether she can trust the one person whose family has every reason to want hers destroyed. Here's your re-engagement moment, because I promise you, this is where the story stops being just a school and starts becoming something much bigger. As Violet survives training, betrayal, secrets buried by the people running her entire world, she starts uncovering the truth about the war her kingdom has been fighting. And the truth is worse than anything she imagined. There are enemies coming that the people in charge have been lying about for years, and the boy she was told to fear might be the only person honest enough to tell her the truth. So how does it resolve? Not neatly. That's important to say. Violet doesn't just survive the physical brutality of dragon rider training. She survives by becoming something the school never accounted for. Someone who outthinks people twice her strength, who turns her supposed weakness into the sharpest weapon in the room. And her relationship with Xaden doesn't get easier as the story goes. It gets more dangerous, more consequential, built on secrets that could destroy them both the moment they come out. But by the final pages, Violet isn't the girl who walked in expecting to die in her first month. She's become someone the entire kingdom underestimated at their own risk. And that's exactly why readers can't stop talking about her. Because underneath the dragons and the war and the romance, this is fundamentally a story about being told you're too weak to matter and proving violently and completely that you were never the fragile one in the room. That's Fourth Wing, and it's only the beginning of what's coming, because 2 more books in this story are already confirmed, which means the wait to find out what happens to Violet and Xaden next is only going to get more unbearable from here. Now I want to slow things down, because this next story isn't about dragons or war. It's about something far more universal and far more devastating. What happens after the person holding your whole world together is suddenly gone? Meet Ella. She has already been abandoned more times than one life should allow. Her parents are dead. Her marriage ended, leaving her alone with 5-year-old twins, Maisie and Colt, and a stack of unpaid bills threatening the resort her family has poured everything into. But through all of it, there was one constant: her brother, Ryan, the one person who never once stopped showing up for her. Here is the problem the story opens with, and it's brutal in its simplicity. Ryan is killed overseas. The one unshakable person in Ella's life is gone, and she's left with nothing but a stack of letters he used to send home, and the twins who don't yet understand that their uncle isn't coming back. And then a stranger appears on her doorstep. His name is Beckett Gentry. He tells her that Ryan sent him, that before he died, Ryan asked Beckett to look after the family he loved most in the world. Ella doesn't want a soldier playing guardian for her family. She spent her whole life being left, and she is not interested in getting attached to someone who's only there out of obligation to a dead man's promise. But Beckett doesn't leave. He fixes the fence. He shows up for the kids. And slowly, without either of them quite agreeing to it, he starts rebuilding the parts of Ella's life that felt permanently broken. What makes their connection so quietly powerful is that it isn't built on grand romantic gestures. It's built on letters. Long before Beckett ever showed up in person, he was the soldier Ryan's family called Chaos, the one writing back and forth with Ella through the darkest years of single motherhood, becoming an emotional lifeline before she ever knew his face. So when he finally stands in front of her, she isn't just meeting a stranger. She's meeting the voice that got her through years of loneliness, now made real. Ella's resistance to him isn't stubbornness for the sake of drama. It comes from somewhere real. Every important person in her life has either died or left, and Beckett showing up out of a sense of duty to a dead man feels, to her, like just one more relationship built on obligation instead of choice. She doesn't want to be someone's mission. She wants to be someone's choice. And so a huge part of this story is Beckett slowly proving through consistency rather than grand declarations that he isn't there because Ryan asked him to be. He's there because he's fallen in love with the family Ryan asked him to protect, with the kids, with the resort Ella is fighting to save, and most of all, with Ella herself. There's also a financial thread running underneath the romance that grounds the whole story in something painfully real. Ella isn't just grieving, she's drowning, trying to keep a struggling family resort afloat while raising twins alone, and every offer of help forces her to confront her own pride and her own fear of being indebted to someone who might still leave. It's a small, human detail, but it's part of what makes Ella feel less like a romance archetype and more like an actual person trying to hold her life together with both hands. This next part is the reason you'll see people online sobbing about this book, so let me give you the re-engagement warning clearly. What happens in the second half of this story is not the ending you're expecting. Just as Ella starts to believe that maybe, finally, life is going to let her keep something good, tragedy strikes again, closer to home and harder to survive than anything that came before. I won't tell you exactly what happens, but I will tell you that this book asks a question most romance novels are too afraid to ask. What do you do when love finds you again, right in the middle of the worst grief of your life? Do you let yourself feel it, or do you protect yourself by staying numb? Here's how it resolves. Ella doesn't get a fairy tale where the pain simply disappears once she falls in love. Instead, the story insists on something harder and more honest, that grief and love can exist in the exact same moment, that you can be shattered and still choose to let someone hold the pieces. Beckett doesn't fix Ella's life. He simply refuses to leave it through every version of it, including the parts that are unbearable. By the final chapter, what you're left with isn't a story about a soldier rescuing a grieving widow. It's a story about two people who kept choosing each other over and over, even when the world kept giving them every reason to give up. And that's exactly why this book has become one of the most reaction video-heavy titles online right now. Because it doesn't just make you cry, it makes you sit with your phone in your hand afterward, unable to immediately explain what you just felt. Okay, before we get into the final book, and trust me, it is a complete tonal shift from everything we just talked about. I want you to think about something. 2 books in, and we've already gone from a war-torn dragon academy to a grieving family finding love in the wreckage of loss. That range is exactly why romance readers can't stay in just one lane. And the last book on this list is going to prove that even further, because we're about to go somewhere much, much darker. This next story does not open gently. It opens with a woman standing in the home of someone who is already dead. Adeline Riley is a horror novelist, someone who has spent her entire career writing about fear from a safe, controlled distance. When her great-grandmother, known to the family as Gigi, passes away, Adeline inherits Parsons Manor, a decaying Victorian mansion with locked rooms, hidden compartments, and a family history soaked in something the family never talks about. Because Gigi wasn't just Adeline's great-grandmother. She was a murder victim, a killing that happened decades ago in that very house and was never solved. Here's the problem. Almost immediately after Adeline moves in, she realizes she isn't alone. Someone is watching her. Red roses appear where they shouldn't. Doors that were locked are suddenly open. The police don't take her seriously. They never really do in stories like this, and so Adeline is left completely on her own, trying to figure out if the danger stalking her has anything to do with the murder that was never solved, or if history in this house is simply repeating itself. And then she finds the diaries. Gigi's diaries, hidden inside the walls, detailing a relationship Gigi had decades earlier with a mysterious man who watched her from the shadows before eventually becoming the great love of her life. The parallel is impossible to ignore. And when Adeline finally comes face to face with the man who's been stalking her, a man who calls himself Zaid, she realizes he already knows everything about her. Her coffee order, her sleep schedule, every part of her daily life, cataloged in silence for months. What's unsettling, and what keeps readers turning pages, is that Adeline doesn't respond the way you'd expect. She's a horror novelist, someone who has spent her career imagining facing exactly this kind of danger from behind the safety of a keyboard. Now it's standing in her house, and instead of simply running, she finds herself drawn toward the mystery of who Zaid actually is and why he's chosen her specifically. Her best friend Daya, sharp and protective, tries repeatedly to pull her back from the edge, worried that Adeline's curiosity is going to get her killed, and for a long stretch of the story, it's genuinely unclear whether Daya is wrong to worry. The house itself becomes almost a character in its own right. Parsons Manor is full of locked rooms Adeline hasn't opened yet, hallways that seem to shift depending on her mood, a history that refuses to stay buried. Every discovery she makes about Gigi's murder pulls her further into a past that mirrors her present in ways that feel less like coincidence and more like inheritance, as though whatever happened to her great-grandmother decades ago was always going to happen to her too. I need to pause here and be honest with you, because this is the part of the story that makes this book so divisive and so wildly popular at the exact same time. Zaid is not a safe character. He is a stalker in the most literal sense of the word, and the story does not soften that. But the book complicates him further by revealing that Zaid also leads an underground operation dedicated to dismantling human trafficking rings, a man capable of real violence in service of protecting people who cannot protect themselves, while simultaneously crossing lines with Adeline that the story does not pretend are simple or safe. This is dark romance in its purest, most uncompromising form. Morally Gray doesn't even begin to cover it. And if intense content around obsession, consent, and violence isn't something you're comfortable reading, this is genuinely not the book for you, and that's completely fair. So here's your re-engagement moment, because the mystery driving this book goes far beyond the romance. As Adeline digs deeper into Gigi's murder, she uncovers a truth that connects her family's past directly to the danger she's facing right now. A conspiracy that reaches much further than one killer, much further than one house, tangled into an organization that has been operating in the shadows for generations. And as Zaid gets pulled back toward the world he's spent years trying to dismantle, Adeline realizes that the person she's falling for might be walking straight into a trap designed specifically to destroy him. The resolution doesn't hand you comfort. It hands you chaos, violence, sacrifice, and a confrontation that forces Zaid to choose between the mission that has defined his entire life and the woman he was never supposed to let himself want. Adeline, in turn, has to decide whether the man who terrified her in the beginning of this story has become the person she trusts most in the world, stalker and protector, wrapped into the same impossible, complicated package. By the end, nothing about this story wraps up cleanly, and it isn't supposed to. It's the first half of a duet, which means the door is left open on purpose. What you're left with instead is the reason this book went viral in the first place. It doesn't ask you to look away from the darkest, most uncomfortable corners of desire and obsession. It asks you to sit in them, uncomfortable and captivated at the same time, unable to stop turning the page even when part of you knows you probably should. So there you have it, 3 completely different love stories and 3 completely different reasons people can't stop talking about them. One is about proving you're stronger than everyone assumed. One is about choosing love in the middle of unbearable grief. And one is about the terrifying, magnetic line between fear and obsession. If you've read any of these already, I want to know which one hit you the hardest. Drop it in the comments, because I read every single one, and I'm genuinely curious which of these 3 broke you the most. And if none of these have made their way to your shelf yet, tell me down there which one you're picking up first, because I promise you, once you start, you are not putting it down. If this kind of deep dive helped you find your next read, there's more where this came from. I've got other videos breaking down entire genres just like this one, so go check those out next. And if you want to make sure you never miss when a new one drops, you know exactly what to do. Thank you so much for spending this time with me. I'll see you in the next one.